As a matter of fact, we have a surprise for you. Is it ready? Hello, Rob Burnett. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It's a great honor.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm eager to hear your thoughts and answer your questions on the fundamentals of caring.
First of all, we would like to ask you if it was pleasant to work with the cast actors.
Yes, I was very, very lucky on this movie. The first thing you care about, of course, is that you have talented performers, which we had in spades with Paul Rudd, Selena Gomez, Craig Roberts, Megan Ferguson, who plays Peaches, Jennifer Ely, who played Trevor's mom. But additionally, as luck would have it, these are some of the nicest people I've ever been around. So it made for a very pleasant experience. It was a lot of fun, no egos. It was just a dream. I think I'll be lucky to ever have a cast this with this combination of talent and geniality ever again.
How long did it take to shoot The Fundamentals for Caring?
The actual shooting for the movie was about 23 to 24 days. We shot in Atlanta, Georgia. There was maybe a month of hard prep. So I was in Atlanta for 2 months. But the actual shooting was relatively quick by movie standards. 23 full days, and then there was a little pickup day at the end. So 24 days in all, which is relatively quick.
Was there a specific scene that was especially difficult to shoot?
Well, I think probably the most difficult stuff for us logistically was all the stuff that we shot at the world's deepest pit. For one thing, it was very unlucky, but it was extremely cold in Atlanta when we shot the movie. Atlanta is southern United States. It's usually not hot during the winter, but it's usually a little bit more mild. It was brutally cold, and that location was difficult, especially when we were down at the bottom of the pit, because the sun went down very quickly because we were sunken. It was a quarry that we were shooting at in Atlanta. So just from a logistical standpoint, it was very difficult. There was times where you could see the actor's breath, which was not good, and you know, the poor actors could not. You know, they had to be dressed really kind of for spring. So it was a little bit punishing all around. But overall, you know, not impossible, but difficult to get the amount of work done that we needed to do in those circumstances.
Now, your movie is an adaptation of a novel by Jonathan Evison. What encouraged you to adapt this novel in particular? Have you got a particular interest in the theme of disabled people, and why?
That's a great question. I read the book. It was actually the first book that I read when I was looking to adapt novels, and I fell in love with it right away. I don't have any personal experience with this type of story. However, a very dear friend of mine, a childhood friend, some years ago, not too long, maybe 6-7 years ago now, passed away from ALS. Here that's known as Lou Gehrig's disease. It's a terrible, terrible illness, and it was the closest that I ever came to this kind of thing. And he was a fantastic guy, a phenomenal guy, very funny, very lighthearted, and this disease kind of attacks your body but not your brain. So I got to see close up what it was like for somebody who had full mental abilities with a deteriorating body, and how he attacked life with humor and vigor and dignity, and this was something that I had always wanted to write about, and I never quite knew how. And when I read Jonathan Evison's beautiful book, this kicked in for me. This resonated with a lot of my personal experiences.
Did you have any disagreement with the author, with any choices that you make?
Well, I think it's fair to say that in many cases, novelists and screenplay adapters are a little bit like the lion and the penguin and the leopard seal in nature, natural enemies. In this case, it was not so, and I really credit Jonathan for that. He was very generous with his work. I did make fairly large changes to the novel in trying to adapt it to the screen, and Jonathan never had a problem with any of it. I think he trusted that I understood the spirit of his work, and tried to capture that spirit. And both of us in our early talks agreed that, you know, a novel and a film, they're really just two different things. And in some ways I've been guilty of this myself. When you read a book and then see a movie, it's very easy to say, oh, you know, the book was better or the film was better. Having this experience now, I feel like they're two completely different pieces of art. You know, I give the credit for all of this to Jonathan. He created these characters, and created a beautiful world that I felt very lucky to be able to dabble within, and try to be very gentle in keeping the spirit of his work. And we maintained a very close relationship throughout the whole process. So I'm very lucky for his generosity.
Would you like to create a movie based on a story of your own someday?
Yes, of course I would, and I do have some ideas that I'm considering and developing. What was interesting for me in this process is doing an adaptation, and this was my first. I didn't know if I would feel ownership of the material, and I absolutely did feel ownership of it. By the time I was writing these characters and writing these scenes and directing the actors and editing and putting the whole thing together, I felt ownership of it. Again, not to compare the ownership versus the ownership that Jonathan has. You know, he created these characters. So I don't mean it in any kind of competitive way. I just think from an artistic way, I felt very much that this material was owned by me as a writer and a director. But sure, I would love to come up with an original idea at some point, and have some things that I'm developing slowly.
Now we would like to ask you a more personal question as your regards to your professional career. How did you become a movie director? Had it been your plan for a long time, and would you go as far as saying it was a child dream?
Well, I was very lucky in that I always had a dream of being a writer, mostly, first and foremost. I did fall in love with filmmaking at a very young age as well, so I knew that I wanted to be part of this world in some capacity. I grew up very far away from show business. My father was a dentist. I had no connection to the business whatsoever. And I was very lucky to get a job on a very popular TV show called The Late Show with David Letterman here in the States. And from there, ended up being a writer on the show and kind of went from there. So it was a more general dream, I think, when I was a kid. And then at some point, I did feel the urge to try to tell longer stories and write longer narratives than what we were doing for a comedy variety show, where we were writing shorter joke heavy pieces.
How did you get to the world of TV and entertainment? What did you study at the university?
In college, I was an English major, although to be honest, I don't know that really contributed much to where I ended up in my career. When I graduated, I went to Tufts University. There was this show, the David Letterman show, that I just thought was amazing. And I applied, actually sent a writing submission in. They did not have writing slots, but I ended up with an internship. I was 1 year out of college. And at the age of 20, I just turned 23, began working for this show, and soon became a writer, and then eventually when I was 29 became the head writer of the show. And it was a very big development for me, working for this show and being around some very, very smart and funny people. At one point, a friend of mine, John Beckerman, and I developed another show that was called Ed, and it was a scripted 1-hour TV show that was on a network here in the States called NBC for 4 years. And it was a kind of a drama comedy show. And that is really where I cut my chops, editing narrative pieces and directing. We shot the show on film, and it was really like making a short movie every week. And directing those episodes really taught me not everything I needed to know, but much of what I know now. I still feel like I have a ways to go.
What is the main difference between producing a popular TV show and a movie like The Fundamentals for Caring? What did you enjoy the most?
When I produced the David Letterman show, it's a little bit more disposable. You're doing 5 shows a week. The show is never perfect. You just do the best you can every night. And when it's over, you do the next one. So it's a lot of running around. You have, a lot of help. You have 10 to 12 writers with you writing material. And it's a little bit, it's controlled mayhem is the best way to describe it. It's an experience that I loved and will never forget. I think back on it often. The idea of being at the Ed Sullivan Theater, which was a famous theater that had a comedy variety show 50 years ago that the Beatles were on. It was very, very exciting. It was like old-time show business. Doing the movie is a really completely different thing, and I think what I like best about the movie is that I feel like it's a little bit more lasting. The Letterman show is lasting in total, but the individual contributions that I made to that show are very hard to point to at this point. I can't really show my kids, oh, here's this 3-minute comedy piece that I wrote and directed. I mean, there are some, and I do, but it's really very pleasing to me that my grandchildren will be able to sit down and watch The Fundamentals of Caring. And if they don't want to, I'll make them, because I'm grandpa. At that point, they have no choice. So I do enjoy, I've enjoyed both. They're very, very different. And again, I think the permanence of telling a longer story is something that I really welcomed at this point in my career.
What is your favorite movie or the one that you would have liked to direct?
My favorite movie is a movie called One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest that was directed by Milos Forman. And it's interesting, but subconsciously there are tiny things in The Fundamentals of Caring that I think are directly influenced by One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I think, and it was not conscious, and it was things that I kind of realized after the fact. I think, for example, though it's a completely different circumstance, I think when Trevor looks at Dot when she says, "Are you asking me on a date?" and there's that big pause and he looks at her and says, "Yes, I am." I think that's very similar to Billy Bibbit in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest telling Nurse Ratched when she says, "Are you ashamed?" And he says, "No, I'm not." There's something about the rhythm of that though I wasn't planning it, when I look at it now, I think, oh yes, this definitely was a heavy influence on me. But there was something about that movie. Some of it may have been my age. I think I was in 9th or 10th grade in high school when that movie came out, and I think that's kind of when you start to find your favorite things. And that movie really spoke to me. I thought it was funny and emotional and beautifully acted and just very true to itself. And it just made me feel like, this is the kind of story that I would like to tell.
Are you planning to direct another movie soon? And can you give us a clue about the theme you're going to explore next?
Yes, I would love to direct another movie. I do not have one precisely lined up at this point. There's a couple that I'm circling at the moment that I have interest in that unfortunately I don't feel right about talking about at this stage of things. I took a little break after Fundamentals and did a couple rewrites on a big studio movie for Disney that stars Kevin Hart. It's a big Christmas movie, and that was sort of a nice palate cleanser, having just done everything on an independent film and worked so hard on in such a small movie. The idea of kind of writing on a big movie with a big studio was kind of a fun experience. But I would like to get back to writing something, directing something of a similar tone, a different story, but the tone of fundamentals is one that is very appealing to me. One that is realistic, can be funny, can be tragic, and in some ways inspirational. Those kind of stories really resonate with me.
We are thanking you on behalf of the whole school, Alliance Française de Santiago. Thank you so much for being here, Rob Burnett.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's amazing that you guys found me, and I'm not sure exactly what the program is that you have there, but I feel like you're in very good hands with your teachers and instructors that could put something like this together. So again, the pleasure is all mine. I appreciate it, and I hope if any of you are future filmmakers out there, you will send me some of your stuff so I can steal it. No, just kidding. But I'm curious to see how you all develop. And again, thank you very much for having me.
Now it's time to say farewell. We thought we were making a TV show about disabled people, but we ended up learning a life lesson. All the students enjoyed this very much. Thank you, and stay tuned on LTV.